Welcome to Could Be Pretty Cool News, the podcast where we dive into the exciting world of creative entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Casey, and together we'll embark on a journey to explore this dynamic ecosystem from multiple angles, including academia, research and data, community building, and compelling personal narratives from creative entrepreneurs themselves. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered as we uncover the stories and strategies behind building successful creative ventures. It's time to discover why the world of creative entrepreneurship could be pretty cool. Our first guest today is Lindsey Gamble, Associate Director of Influencer Innovation at Later. With a deep involvement in the creator economy, Lindsey shares his journey from blogging to driving brand innovation through social media. Get ready for an enlightening conversation filled with invaluable insights on trend forecasting and the influence of social platforms on culture and business. Okay, great. I'm super honored today to have Lindsey Gamble on Could Be Pretty Cool News. And Lindsey, for folks who don't know about you, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your role in the creator economy? And how did you even get involved in this space?
Thanks for having me on, first of all. Always honored whenever I can join a podcast or just someone's interested in hearing my point of view. So thanks for having me. Lindsey Gamble, based in Boston, Massachusetts. How do I fit in the creator economy? I feel like a couple different ways. So during my 9 to 5, I work at a company called Later. And I actually work originally at Maverick, but Maverick acquired Later, which is a social media management platform that is pretty well known in the social space. And the two companies came together. And I've been at Later, formerly known as Maverick, for over 5 years, 5.5 years maybe now. And I work as the associate director of influence innovation. So during my 9 to 5, I'm helping brands really drive innovation by working with creators that could be on new platforms, that could be different content formats, different types of creators, different use cases, which has been really fun. And I guess taking a step back is I've always been really interested in just kind of the creator economy before it was called the creator economy. So I grew up drawing. After I graduated from college, I started a music blog and really leaned into my passions for writing and started interviewing artists. I had two podcasts actually. So probably back in 2015, so like early on, and just really loved just being a creator. That kind of evolved into me working with brands on Instagram, documenting my hiking and travel. And then eventually I pivoted to what I do today outside of work is like writing about the creator economy. And so I'm really passionate about just like how social media platforms change, how people leverage those social media platforms, and ultimately how do they build businesses and monetize, and how social media itself is really playing a big role in culture, business, and everything else.
So we love getting origin stories of folks on the show because it's almost like how does someone get involved with analyzing the creator economy space? And oftentimes it is, yeah, I started off as a creator. I started off, this was something that I enjoyed. And so I love how you said I was a part of the creator economy before it was called the creator economy. And speaking of that sort of foresight, you have made some pretty accurate predictions about the creator economy in the past. And so I'm curious to know, with all of your experience and the things that you do, what is your process for making these predictions? If you can tell us, if it's not a secret, just to kind of give us some more insight into how you do what you do.
And I guess to add to what I said before, I think, like you said, I think I'm pretty good at kind of forecasting what's going to happen and kind of connecting the dots across the creative economy, but just also different industries. And so what I noticed when I was writing my music blog, I was able to see what music and albums and different things that were coming out and kind of predict what artist was going to pop off next. And so I've been really good at connecting the dots, not just within the social media space. And when it comes to the creative economy, when I wanted to move into this space, so I used to work at Dana Cancer Hospital in clinical research. So a totally different industry, but I've always been interested in social media, like I just talked about. And during that time, I did the music blog to kind of educate myself. And then I started focusing more on the social media aspect because to me, that was a place that I could kind of stand out from others by not working directly in it. And so with the internet, there's so much information out there. So I started just reading different blogs. I started following different people that were writing about social media and tech and just consuming all that, similar to what someone does with sports or pop culture or really anything they're interested in. And by making that part of my daily life or just whatever kind of basically like a hobby, I started to be able to connect the dots between what was going to happen. And so I don't have like a real process by being able to come up with these predictions. I think by keeping a pulse on what's happening and taking a look from what it means to the different players, so the social media platforms, why are they launching this feature? What does it mean? How does it help their business? Is it a way to get more users? Is it to cater to creators? Is it to drive ad revenue? And then looking at it from the creator standpoint, how can a creator use this feature? How can they build their audience? How can they monetize? And then looking from it from the brand standpoint. And so looking at the different POVs of the major players and coming up with where things are going. And so I don't use spreadsheets or anything. I just write about it through my newsletter, through LinkedIn posts, and happen to have a pretty good memory. So I'm able to tie together what I've read 6 months ago and kind of identify where I think things are going next. Um, so I don't know if that's a great answer, but I would say a little bit of consistency and then also not just consuming the information, but taking the time out to think about what it means, which I think is the most important because if you're able to understand why LinkedIn is focused on creators, if you're able to understand that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, now you understand why LinkedIn is where it is today.
No, I think that's a great answer. I think a lot of times when artists and creators are presented with what data do you know about your industry or what data, like their eyes can kind of gloss over. So to hear you say, like, yeah, I'm not using any particular formulas or spreadsheets. I'm just staying on top of what's happening. I'm trying to pay attention. I'm trying to find patterns and connections between what's going on in the industry and creators. To me, that's a very valid method of at least being aware that these are things that creators and publishers should probably continue to keep their finger on the pulse of. So, yeah, that's a great answer.
And I would say that I mentioned I read a newsletter, which is a big part of kind of the content creation I do today. And I would say because I do that weekly, I haven't done the last couple of weeks just because I've been taking a little break, but that forces me to think about predictions or think about the meaning of something because I'm not just writing about what a new feature came out, but I make sure to give some type of analysis. And so when I'm writing about something one week, I can look back to the previous week and kind of connect the dots. And I think that writing about something over and over really helps you understand what could happen next.
Very true. And okay, speaking of what could happen next, okay, we're going into the hot takes, maybe. I don't know. So, yes, this past week in Congress land, TikTok has been a big subject matter for some reason. And so, there are a lot of folks who are wondering, especially folks who are reaching their audiences through TikTok, who are some are making their livelihoods through TikTok. They're wondering like how is the possible abolishment of this platform going to affect their livelihoods as creators? And so in the past, you've discussed the line or you've discussed the blurring lines between creators and publishers and platforms. And stuff is getting really real out here. And so I'm curious to know, again, with your foresight, how do you see these issues affecting folks in the future?
What's happened with TikTok is unique. There's been a couple scenarios or a couple times where TikTok was going to be banned and it didn't happen. This is probably what the closest we've been to it based on how everything's progressing. And it's gonna be tough. I think they'll work it out, though. I don't think anyone really actually thinks it's gonna be banned, right? But it's great for people that wanna write think pieces and, create content around it. I haven't done that yet just because I think it's not played, just overwritten about already. But I think because of some of that backlash we're seeing from creators and publishers, going back to what I wrote about in Trends, is that we look at creators as like kind of individuals that create content, but everyone is particularly a creator. And so that's why we see brands and advertisers also being concerned about TikTok, because they've essentially become creators on TikTok. And by creating content in a way that's similar to TikTok, whether they're doing it with in-house talent or they're working with creators or they're just structuring their personality to be more human, they've been able to leverage platforms like TikTok and be able to build up these audiences and monetize. So it's scary for businesses, creators, and small businesses and everyone else. I think the greater trend that I wrote about and have been looking at is like, who's a creator, who's a publisher, what's a brand? They're all the same. Creators are trying to be more like publishers and creating content and monetizing it. And then, as I mentioned before, brands are pretty much doing what creators are doing. And then the social media platforms are looking at both, not the same, but more similar now. The platforms over indexed on catering to creators a few years ago during the pandemic when creators were, they converged, right? When the creator economy kind of became the creator economy. And that was offering creative funds, tools, and audience growth. And they're still doing that, but now we see TikTok, we see Pinterest, we see Meta, we see some of these other platforms starting to put their attention back on publishers and brands and magazines that, are creating content, but they typically can do so in a way that kind of feeds the gray areas or the gaps that a social media platform has. And so Pinterest is probably the best example. They've partnered with Tastemade and all these different publishers on these deals that they haven't said how much money they're paying them or what the specific details are. But based on what it seems like is that they're incentivizing these publishers to create certain content, whether it's wedding season, food and beverage, all these key verticals that align with the type of content that they want to get on the platform. And it's becoming a little more short form video and long form video. And so by partnering with publishers, the platforms can get more of the content they want as opposed to having to beg creators to create this content, where creators ultimately want to create the content that they feel best is representation of them.
So, another, I guess, top of mind subject for a lot of creators, brands, publishers, everybody is AI. And so, you've talked about the integration of AI across various social media platforms. I know for LinkedIn Premium, you can do the thing where you type your post and hit the button and then it'll make it sound like you're 10 times smarter, or that's probably not the what the functionality is called. But I guess for better, for worse, the good, the bad, what do you kind of see the future of AI integrations in social media meaning for the creator economy? Will people be unique anymore? Will we all just be able to push a button and all sound the same?
Disruption. So I think for people that want to be creators or are just starting out, AI is going to allow them kind of speed up that process and that journey, because there's the ability to use a chat GPT or some of these image generator apps or just any of the tools out there to be able to easily go from ideation to publishing. And I think especially when it comes to video content and photo content, is that you're not limited as a person to become a creator based on the skills you have to take a photo and be able to edit it or shoot a video and know how to cut it right. The tools are getting so good that you can essentially do that by becoming a prompt engineer and being able to use your imagination and leverage these tools and find the right prompts and texts and commands to be able to create content just like anyone that has a camera or a video camera. And so I think it's a great opportunity for creators to be able to just like speed up processes and it democratizes being a creator. There's also disruption too, right? People are using other people's content, basically, right? You don't have Gen AI without some type of existing works. And so for me, especially writing, newsletter, my content can be copied easily, and it happens all the time. It happens by humans, but I imagine, the AI tools are scraping that content. And to me, I think we're just changing, like the media landscape and the content landscape is changing, where it's not so much important to just creating content. It's really about the perspective. And so thinking about my own content creation, someone could easily copy and paste something I write and I'll never know about it. But they can't copy and paste my perspective. And so while they can copy the breakdown of a new feature and what it means, I still am unique by having my own perspective and that human aspect. And I think that's the opportunity for creators in a world full of AI. And then I think one thing too is that I've talked about and written about is that some creators are not going to be harmed by it. You know, brands are looking to cut costs, and creators have been a great way to cut costs, especially during the pandemic where they didn't have access to the in-house studios. And so you had creators creating content that would be in a lookbook or be in commercials because they were the most cost efficient and also where attention was going. And now with AI, you know, brands have another option, and AI is making it a lot cheaper. And so instead of going to a creator to produce 50 assets that you use in your paid media campaigns or repost organically, you could use some of these big tech platforms, especially when it comes to ads, and create net new images that are probably just as good as what humans can create. And so that money might not be going to creators like it was before because there's this new cheaper option that you can do at scale. And that's where I see the impact is. And it's just something you have to kind of adapt to as someone in the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag of like, "Oh, this is exciting," and, this is terrifying," a sentiment I'm sure a lot of creators share. And so, out of curiosity, I know we're still a little early in 2024, but do you have any Lindsey Gamble predictions or things that as we're looking towards the rest of the year, heading into an election season, heading into we got the Olympics this year, so much happening.
Everything.
Do you have any initial predictions or even like hopes for what 2024 is going to bring for the creator economy?
Let's start off with the election, right? And talking about AI, there's going to be some issues there, right? Misinformation. Someone's going to create a video of a candidate saying something and that's not true. And at some point, it's going to be overwhelming. So people are going to actually pull back and say, hey, I actually want human generated content. So that's around the election standpoint. I think other predictions for this year, just and I wrote about this, it's not necessarily anything new, but just how social media is expanding to bigger screens. I've talked about this a lot, and even like the last couple of weeks, YouTube has leaned into this a lot, where it's really building experiences for creative content to be on the television, to be on just tablets and bigger screens than what we use in our phones every day. TikTok has done a lot with this too, where it's has some advertising solutions where brands can amplify uh, their videos to billboards, to screens at the airport, screens at the gas station too, which is funny. You can fill up your gas and watch a TikTok video. And so those are great ways for brands to expand their reach, but also great for creators to get in front of new audiences. And then I'll give you one more. There's been a lot of layoffs, right? Which is tough. I feel bad. Something that's always top of mind for me working in the marketing industry. I think we're going to see more people become creators. I think out of just what happens. If you were to get laid off, it's tough to get a job today. And if you were someone that has been a part-time creator, that might be the opportunity for you to lean into going full-time, whatever that means to you. And I'm excited for people to get their careers and what they want to do in their own hands and have a little more ownership and just have some more options, regardless of what we're doing at that particular time.
Our next guest is Sheri Winkelmann, a multifaceted talent in the entertainment industry. Her path led her from the prestigious theater school at DePaul University to the bustling streets of New York. Sherry's story is one of resilience and reinvention, from navigating the demanding expectations of Hollywood to spearheading the revival of a historic Hawaiian theater. Stay tuned to hear how this actress, writer, and producer found her true calling.
Hi, I'm Sheri Winkelmann. I'm an actress, writer, producer. My origin story starts at 5. I was in a dance recital for the Good Ship Lollipop, and I was in the front row because I was short, and we were supposed to all dance in a line together. And I stepped out of the line and started rolling my eyes and making funny faces. And I saw my grandmother cracking up. And I learned right then it was more fun to make people laugh than anything. So that's where it started. Sure. In high school, I auditioned for Twelfth Night on my birthday, and I got this wonderful comedic role called Mariah. So that was my first play with Shakespeare, and I've fallen in love with Shakespeare ever since. It was really significant because it was my 16th birthday. It was really neat. And then I auditioned for it was called then the Goodman School of Drama, but now it is the theater school at DePaul University. So I auditioned for that and got in. And each year you had to be asked back. So it was a very tough program. And my last year I got a full tuition scholarship, which was wonderful. And from there, we had a showcase at the end of the year where our school would invite agents from around the country to see us do a 3-minute monologue. And I got picked up by the William Morris Agency in New York from that showcase. And I went to New York after that. No, it's in school. We were all about technique and dramatic history and movement and voice. We didn't have any business training whatsoever, which is odd because when you come out, the only thing we were told is get an agent, but it's just the tip of the iceberg as far as learning this business. I did travel to Europe after graduation for a little while, and I asked my agent if it was all right if I come after the trip. She's like, sure. I was planning to be on the trip 3 weeks, but I ended up staying 2 years because I saw theater in every single country, and I just was fascinated. And I thought, if I'm going to be doing this the rest of my life, I want to study life. I don't want to just read about people in books because I want to play as wide a range and have as many experiences. So I actually went there 2 years later. She still kept the door open, which was amazing. But by then I had spent so much time in Europe. I saw where cathedrals are built over generations. I'm an American, so everything's instant. But you go to Europe, it's like, well, this family started this cathedral, and 400 years later, generations later, they're still building it. So there was such a sense of art and history that was embedded in me. So when I got into auditioning, I was introduced to all the heads of studios, Paramount, Universal, and everything was about your looks and your weight. And I was like, what does this have to do with art? So I was really messed up for a little while in the head, like how to navigate the looks, female, ingenue, young girl side of it with my soul that really cared about creating an art and contribution. I was very feisty, that 20-year-old self. So back then we would actually be interviewed and audition. It wasn't, and now it's self-tape. You're not even in the room with the human being, but it was so much more personal then. And these were big meetings. So I remember meeting John Sayles, one of my favorites when I was young, and talking about the sides and the script. And he was in the room for the audition, which was amazing. So I had some incredible conversations with directors, but a lot of it was just based on your looks. So I remember having a conversation with my agent, and I was on a constant diet and I was as skinny as I could possibly be. And they kept telling me, you still need to be 10 pounds lighter for the camera. I said, well, what you want me to weigh, I weighed in 5th grade. So I don't know what to tell you, but I was down to like juicing and 3 aerobics classes a day. I'm like, my body, this is it. It just doesn't get any smaller. So it was frustrating, that part of it. And I remember I got called back for a movie. I was pinned for a really big role in a movie, and they had me audition for 3 months. I was called back for 3 months because I had 2 boyfriends in the film. So they had the first boyfriend nailed down and they were working on the second one. And every day my agent's like, I love you, blah, blah, blah. The last second, producer's friend got the role, and it slipped right out from under my hands after 3 months of callbacks. And I think that planted a seed where I said, one day I'm going to have to make my own stuff because this is heartbreaking to have no control. So I had a hard time with that part of it. Probably the turning point was a conversation with my agent where I told her the kind of films that affected me and how much I loved them and how much they influenced me. And I want to do work that contributes to humanity, that uplifts humanity. And she said, you're in the wrong field. You don't have any control over that. And I was like, okay, I better think this through. So I was going to take a little hiatus and go to Hawaii. But at that point, I couldn't afford a vacation. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to take a break and move there and sort this all out in my spirit and see where I end up. And I ended up staying and writing plays, directing plays. I auditioned and got in a Hawaiian hula troupe, so I learned Polynesian dance and danced hula and Tahitian dance professionally. And then I ended up becoming, some people had heard I was in theater, and I was on the island, the Big Island, in a small town of Hilo, and they had this beautiful 1920s historic theater that had been closed. And somebody approached me and said, we heard you're in theater. Do you think you could help us get this reopened? I'm like, oh, that's a massive project. So I decided to change my life and stay. And I got funding from the county, wrote grants, went around to businesses and got this theater reopened and programmed it. So I curated the very first Hawaiian Film Festival, the first Tahitian Film Festival. I wanted to have a renaissance of local arts because hula was huge there, but nothing else really in the film space. I programmed independent movies. We had a chamber concert series. I brought in all the Hawaiian music stars like Willie Kay and the Makaha Sons. I went around to all the islands and begged them to lower their price and come help us get this theater reopened and do a show. So that, I guess, the entrepreneur was born there. I sectioned off like the first 100 rows of seats, and I said, these are the VIP seats. You guys are going to pay more, and managed to make this theater profitable, and it's still running today. After a certain amount of time, I realized I could stay on this island forever, but the bug, that performing bug, doesn't let you rest too long. So I was like, I'm getting sucked into admin now, and it's great that I got this jewel up and running for the community, but it's time for my next steps. So I moved back to what's called the mainland, US, and I ended up in LA. And started getting back into auditioning. So that was quite a few years ago. And then I started a business so that I could support myself as an actor. I didn't want to waitress. I didn't want to, because I had done that through college. I started a business with a health product and built up this company so that I could support myself. But part of this company donated 10% of their health food to people and groups in need around the world. So I started a project for Tibetan refugees. So I started going over to North India and volunteering for 6 weeks at a time every 4 months. I was back and forth doing this project called Compassion in the Himalayas. I ended up on one of my trips meeting a Tibetan doctor, and he came to the US, and then we got married. So that was a huge detour. And then I moved to New York City to be with him. So I kind of shifted gears and moved to New York City. That ultimately didn't work out, but that brought me to New York. From New York, I went back to Chicago, my hometown, and then I came to Georgia just a couple years ago. Got an offer with the J. Purvis agency during COVID, and they said, move. I said, I'd love to get out of the winters here, no problem. So I came to Georgia, but oddly, I started writing this feature film when I was in Chicago, set in the South, not knowing I'd be moving here. And as it turned out, it was just an amazing coalescing, divine timing. I just follow the prompts. I don't always know why I'm doing what I'm doing, but I do listen to my guidance. And then that landed me here, and I've been networking to get the film made, and I love Georgia. And now I met Catherine Hollis Peters, who is in a producing program called Largo AI, and they submit scripts from around the world. They take submissions. They showcase at AFM, EFM, and Cannes film markets, Cannes being the biggest and most competitive. And what happens is if your script wins a spot in the competition, you get to pitch on stage to a room full of investors. So that's what I'll be doing May 16th at the Palais main stage at Cannes. The name of the film is called Bingo Heist. And it's about a scrappy Southerner who catches her husband cheating with the preacher's daughter, and she up and leaves him and takes her pet goat, which is the only friend she has in the world. And she lands in a trailer park, and she thinks she's gone from one level of hell to the next, but then finds this found family she's never had, and that this is the community she's been longing for all her life. And just when she's getting settled in, corporate developers swoop in. They're going to buy the park, raise the rents, and render everybody homeless. But being the survivor that she is, she sees a $100,000 regional bingo championship coming to town, and she decides to find a way to rig it and win. And through many missteps, ultimately, she does achieve that. And she turns it then into a co-op so that the residents don't have to worry about being homeless again. So it's built on a real model and a real crisis that's happening around our country right now. Tiffany Fitzhenry of Fitzhenry Films has come on board as the lead producer, so I couldn't be more thrilled. So this is our first collaboration together. My company is called Kelman Films, so we'll be working on this, baby. Hopefully, if all goes well, we'll be shooting this fall. You have to see why it is you want to do what you want to do. And if it burns from within your soul and there's something that you have to discover about life or yourself or that you need to express, then you need to follow that. I think our fast-paced culture, a lot of it has to do with looks and fame, and that's going to be a very painful dead-end road. I think people that really have this creative desire to express themselves and to learn about life and express life, you just have to follow your own path. There's no two paths that are even remotely identical in this field. And when I kept trying to do it the way I was taught and it has to happen this way, I was getting nowhere. And it's scary to step out on a limb and be the only one out there and just trusting that you're going to get there. And many times, this has been a long process of this film. I've been working on it for 4 years. I could see friends and family like, why don't you do something else with your life? And I would check in with myself and I'm like, this brings me so much joy. I have to do this. I'll get as far as I get with it, God willing, but I literally have to do this. There's nothing else I could imagine doing. So when you run into those roadblocks, which you will, and those obstacles that seem insurmountable, if you check in with yourself and you know in your heart it's right to keep going, a way will open sooner or later. Just have faith and keep moving. It may not look like anything is making sense or connecting, or it seems like you're just going down a futile path, but years later, you will see the groundwork is being laid. You will see dots start to connect. And it's like your life is this tapestry. You're only given one thread at a time. But if you just keep following each thread with your whole being and you're sincere, you're going to see that you've woven this gorgeous tapestry that is your life and that is your contribution. But you can't see it when each little dot doesn't seem like it's connecting. But sooner or later, they connect and it will make sense.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Until next time, we encourage you to continue nurturing your process. Farewell, and may all of your creative endeavors flourish. Could Be Pretty Cool News is a Could Be Pretty Cool original production that was workshopped as a part of the 2023 Google News Initiative Pre-Launch Lab. This episode was edited by Trinity Jackson. Our executive producer and host is Casey Willis, and our production coordinator is Liz Moore. The original theme music was composed by Camille Stennis, and our cover art was designed by Aaliyah Johnson. Special thanks to our guests. To find out more about them, you can visit our newsletter at couldbeprettycoolnews.substack.com. Thank you for listening.